what we've been learning. If a person goes to a bris and they have a nice breakfast spread with bagels, lox, cream cheese, tomatoes, onions. So what would happen? What should you do when you take the bagel and you put it all on your plate and you want to recite the bracha? Should you recite the bracha on the complete bagel and then cut it up, cut it in half and fill it with the cream cheese and the lox and the lettuce and tomato and onion and so on, and recite the bracha on the whole bagel? Or should you make your sandwich and afterwards recite the hamoitzi on your full sandwich? What do you think? Yes, Robert.
I vote for the full hamotzi.
What it was full? What does that mean? Full hamotzi?
I mean the bagel that's complete.
The bagel that's complete without the lettuce and
no, with everything.
Oh, with everything. So it's cut in half. It's a cut in half bagel.
Yeah.
But it has other items in it. But you would rather do that because you feel
the greater volume is the bagel than anything else.
Oh, so now it becomes larger.
Well, in my mind, anyways.
I didn't think about that. I didn't think about that. That's an interesting point. Now it's sort of larger than the other bagel. Yeah. That is an interesting point. Yes, Ben.
I would think that you say the bracha first on the bagel, and one of the reasons I would say is it's served usually whole in Chabad, and then there is a kadar on the table. So I would say they expect you to bless on the bagel first, and then
Ben, we don't do what they expect. We do what we want.
Right. That's right.
Yes, but what's the halacha? You know.
And I've been to many places where the bagels are already pre-cut, but not broken open. Let's say.
Right. Not complete.
1 second, Robert.
It's connected. It's connected in one spot. It's not completely cut.
No, Ben, you're correct. We do what halacha says, not what we want. But it sounded like your reasoning was that because the caterer gave it to you with a cutter.
I asked the caterer is the Rebbitzin.
The Rebbitzin, So because she didn't cut it before, so you're saying it sounds like she wants you to recite the bracha on the whole, or you're saying because it must be her husband told her that. Her husband must have told her.
It's probably the thing to do. And even when it's the bagels, when they are cut, they're not cut completely. There is a part of the bagel that's still connected.
Okay.
So when you grab the bagel, you're really grabbing the whole thing, and it's not a half a bagel. You can break it off if you want to.
Right. So you think you should recite the bracha on the bagel before you finish cutting it in half? That's what you think. Yeah. Now, from the simple reading of the Gemara, it seems like there's an argument in the Gemara about this. Because we spoke about pas sinuma bakara. If you have the bread pieces that somehow is getting, you're putting it into this liquidy, soupy mix. And one rabbi said that you could recite a hamaitzi on it. And we explained that it's talking about you have the option. You could recite the hamaitzi on the whole piece, or you could wait until you put it into this soup and it breaks apart, or you break it apart and put it in the soup. This is on the previous page at the bottom, 39b. We spoke about this, and we had the opinion of the first opinion was Reb Chia bar Ashi, who said that when you have this bread that's broken, you make hamaitzi on it. We explained it means that because you like it better broken up, so you should recite the hamaitzi on that piece, on the pieces.
Well, Rabbi Huna says that now you can bless on it in pieces and you are patur from waiting to doing it on the full one.
Just 1 second.
But
so this is
Yochanan
Reb Chia. This is Reb Chia bar Ashi, and then it said that argued on Reb Chia. You have to keep in mind there's a lot of Reb Chias. There's a Reb Chia bar Abba. There's a Reb Chia bar Ashi. There's a just plain Reb Chia. Not only is there different names of Reb Chia, but it's interesting. I just figured this out thanks to Isaac. Isaac bought me this great book from Art Scroll. Thank you, Isaac, because last night I went to sleep. I couldn't figure something out because I saw the Reb Chia in our Gemara contradicted the Reb Chia in a Jerusalem Talmud. And what I found out from your book, Isaac, is that when it just says Reb Chia in the Babylonian Talmud, it's different than the simple Reb Chia in the Jerusalem Talmud. In the Jerusalem Talmud, Reb Chia, the simple Reb Chia, whenever it just says Reb Chia, it's Reb Chia bar Abba. And the regular Reb Chia in the Jerusalem Talmud is someone else. Is the plain Reb Chia who's a Tana, and the Reb Chia in the Jerusalem Talmud is actually an Amora, Reb Chia bar Abba. Anyway, in our Gemara we've got Reb Chia and Reb Chia bar Ashi. So in any event, what we have here is Reb Chia bar Ashi had said that you recite Hamoitzi on this broken pieces of bread, and this argued on the regular Reb Chia, because Reb Chia says that you should recite it on a shalem, on something complete, and on that Rava argued and said not only do you recite the bracha on something complete, but you have to recite it on fully on. It should be the full bracha on something complete, not just finish it. Recite most of the bracha on something complete and finish it by you cut it at the end. Complete the bracha on a complete. It should be complete, and finish the bracha on something complete. And although the Gemara says Hilchasa Karava, the interesting thing is, the question is, does Reb Chia bar Ashi's statement have any validity? And what it boils down to is, what we're dealing with here is the argument between Robert and Ben is basically a question of, we know that there is some importance to something that's shalem, especially bread. When bread is complete, there is importance to it. On the other hand, there's also importance to something that is chaviv, something that you cherish and that you enjoy. Let me mute everyone. Oh boy. So the idea of chaviv, something that you cherish, you enjoy, would make sense that a bagel with lox and cream cheese and lettuce and tomato and onion is a lot more cherishable than just a plain bagel. So this seems to be what we're dealing with. Which one takes priority, something that you cherish or something that's complete? And the argument with Reb Chia and Rava seems to be in an additional area, which is, how should a person recite the bracha? Is there importance? To what extent does it mean reciting a bracha on something complete? And they both emphasize, Rava and Reb Chia both emphasize that the importance of reciting a bracha on something complete. But the question is, would they argue if something is chaviv, something is you cherish the broken piece more than you cherish the complete piece? Now, the interesting thing is, in Shulchan Aruch, there's two chapters. There's one is about bread, chapter 168, and then there's chapter 211, and both of them deal with preferences when it comes to brachas. But the chapter 168 talks about bread, chapter 211 talks about fruits and vegetables and shahakal and other items. Now, if you just open up from the beginning of this chapter, if you have slices of bread, and you have a complete bread, and they're all the same type, so the bracha should be on the complete. This is the way it starts off. And the idea here is that it's called hidur mitzvah. You're beautifying the mitzvah by reciting it on something complete. Now, it says, even if it's even if it's not like a white bread, if it's even a dark, the whole wheat, and it's small, and the pieces are white and big, you should recite it on the complete bread. But if it's a difference of barley and wheat, then there is a method which we'll soon see in our Gemara about how to put them together and recite the bracha on both. Now, this only applies if you want to eat from both, but if you only want to eat from one of them, so then there's no issue. And the question really is, what happens if one of them is more cherishable? Now, we're going to have to put this on hold because we want to see the next Gemara. And and then we'll come back to it because we've still got a few more important points in the Gemara. So let's go now to the Gemara that we were learning. We're going to start with the Itmar, which is 6 lines from the top of the page. Lamed Tes Amud Beis 39b. Itmar Heviu Lifnehem Tesisin Ushleiman. We learned, it was said that if they brought before them, this is like a statement of Amoraim, of the rabbis of the Talmud. And this is what they were discussing. It was said in the base medrash. Itmar, Heviu lefneim pesisin ushleiman. They had brought before them pieces and complete ones. So you had both in front of you. So the way Rashi learns this is Amar Rav Huna mavarech al psisim. So Rav Huna says you can recite the bracha on pieces. Upaiter as ashleiman, and you can exempt the complete one even if you recite the bracha on the pieces. You can exempt the shleiman, the complete ones. Now, the way Rashi's learning is that you're going to recite the bracha on whichever one you want. And when the Gemara says here, you recite it on the pieces, it doesn't mean you have to recite it on the pieces. It means you can recite it on the pieces, which is different than you might have thought. You might have thought you have to recite it on a complete thing. And here, Rav Huna tells us, no, you can recite it on the piece of bread, and you could exempt the shleiman, exempt the complete. So here you have 2 bagels in front of you. One is cut in half, one isn't. Rav Huna says you could recite it on the piece and exempt the complete one. Now, what happens if one is bigger than the other? So here, this opinion would hold that you have to recite it on the bigger one. You have to recite, depending on which one is bigger, you would recite the bracha on the bigger. So Rav Huna seems to follow the logic of that it's not important to go after a shalem, a complete, and there is something that you do go after, and that would be something that's large. Now, Rabbi Yochanan says, Shlema is a mitzvah min ha-mubchar. He says it's a better mitzvah to do the Shlema, the complete one. And as we just saw in the Shulchan Aruch, it does mention that, of course, that there is importance to doing a Shlema and the complete one. But if you have a slice of wheat and a complete loaf of barley, everyone would agree that you recite the bracha on the piece of wheat bread, and you exempt the shlema, the complete one, of the siorim, of the barley. Now, what the Gemara is telling us is that there is we sometimes have preferences that contradict each other. You may have two types of bread, of wheat bread and barley bread, and you also have complete versus sliced. And they seem to contradict each other. On the one hand, preference should be given to wheat over barley. Why is wheat better than barley? Because in the verse that blesses the land that we speak about, the land, the fruit and grains that Israel is blessed with, we mention wheat before barley. So there's a preference to wheat over barley. And there's also a preference to, according to Rabbi Yochanan, to something whole over something that is sliced. So what do you do when you have a contradiction here? You have sliced barley, you have sliced wheat bread, but you have a whole barley bread. So which one should you recite the bracha on? On the one hand, according to Rabbi Yochanan, you're supposed to recite it on something whole. On the other hand, you're supposed to recite it on wheat instead of on the barley. But the wheat is sliced, the barley is the whole. So you have a contradiction of preferences. So Rabbi Yochanan says that the preference of wheat over barley is first. That preference overrides the preference of sliced over whole. So first you recite it on wheat, and then you recite it on the barley, even though the wheat is sliced. Now, Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba. Now, Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba says, Kitanoi, this seems to be an argument of the Tanoim, because we have a Mishnah that talks about this. And the Mishnah says, Tarmin, Batzel Katan, Shalem, you take Truma from a small onion. For example, you have 50 onions, and you want to give 2%. So out of 50 onions, you're going to give 1 onion for Truma. So if you, you have the option in front of you, you have to decide what to do. And here, here the first opinion in the Mishnah tells us you should take a whole onion instead of taking a half of a large onion. So you have in front of you maybe some halves and some wholes, and you have a half of a large one, which is bigger than a small whole one. Which one would you take? So the first opinion says that you should take the whole small one instead of a large half of a large one, which is maybe larger than this small one. Nevertheless, take the complete one. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, like Rabbi Yehuda says no. Rather, elachatzi batzel gadol, take the half of the large one, which is larger. And And this seems to be the argument. My love, isn't this in this specific argument of what we are arguing about here? We have two Amoraim, Rav Huna and Rabbi Yochanan. They are rabbis of the Talmud. They seem to be arguing the same thing as rabbis of the Mishnah argued, the first opinion and the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. So the first opinion is often without a name. Generally, that's Reb Meir. Reb Meir is generally the first opinion in the Mishnahs. Doesn't say his name, and but it's not necessarily so. Sometimes it could be other rabbis. But the first opinion is called the Tanakama, the first opinion, and the second opinion is Reb Yehuda. Reb Yehuda is also very popular in the Mishnahs, and Reb Yehuda says that you should recite the bracha on the larger half onion. Not recite the bracha. We're talking about separating truma. You should separate and give to the kohen the large piece, even though it's a piece. And the Tanakama, the first opinion, said, give the small onion, even though it's smaller than a half of a large one. Now, aren't they arguing about this? The master holds, meaning the first opinion held that, the second opinion, excuse me, Mar Savar, master here is referring to Rabbi Yehuda, the second view. He holds chashuv adif, something that is more significant is better, meaning the larger piece. Umar Savar Shalem adif, and the master, meaning the first opinion, the Tanakama, holds that something complete is better. So it seems like they're arguing about the same argument as what we're talking about when it comes to bread. Should you take a slice, or should you take something complete? And when it came to bread, we had the opinion of Rav Huna, who said that you could take either one, but if one of them is larger, you should take the larger, even if it's a slice. That sounds like the second opinion, Rav Yehuda. You take the half of a large onion. The first opinion of the Mishnah, the Tanakama, said you take a whole onion. That seems like Rabbi Yochanan said about bread, that if you have two options, one is a whole loaf and one is a sliced piece, and even if it's larger, the piece is larger, nevertheless, take the whole. That sounds like the Tanakama, the first opinion of the Mishnah. So the Gemara seems to think that it goes hand in hand. The Gemara answers that it's not really so. When it comes to Truma, we're dealing with something else than a bracha. It's different than a bracha. The laws of bracha are different. The laws of Truma have another issue. You know what we're dealing with Truma? We're dealing with the fact that they didn't have refrigeration in those days. And if you give someone if you're going to give the Kohen a half an onion, by the time you find the Kohen to give it to him, it might not be an onion anymore. I mean, it'll be a lemon, be sour, and it won't be. It might, So it's an issue of being more practical. And on the other hand, this is larger. So the Gemara says that this is not the explanation. Rather, if there is a kohen, meaning you'll be able to hand it to the kohen soon, no one argues. The choshev adif, you should give the large half. You should give the large half rather than a whole small one. Because you have the kohen there, hand it to him. He'll have it for his breakfast. He'll put it in his salad and his lox and bagels. But where there is no kohen, ki pligi the leka kohen. Where do they argue when there is no kohen? It's non, because we learned in the Mishnah, kol makam sheyesh kohen teirem min hayafa. wherever there is a kohen, you take truma from the better one. Wherever there is no kohen, toirem min hamiskayim, you take truma from the thing that will last longer. Lasting longer is the priority if there is no kohen. Rabbi Yehuda says, Ein toirem element ayofe, you should always take from the better one, and that means the larger. So Rabbi Yehuda seems to follow the logic of concentrating on what you're giving more than the recipient who's receiving it might not be so valuable to him, but you have to give the best. You have to give the larger thing. And I was not thinking on so much on the recipient, how he's going to benefit from it. It's more to honor the truma with a larger gift. And the other opinion is more about the recipient, that how's he going to use it if it's, it's not going to have such a long shelf life, and you don't have a kohen here, and so you're waiting for a kohen. You're going to have to keep it, and it's not going to last too long. But so this is the argument there, and that's not connected really. It's not necessarily connected to the laws of bracha. The bracha, you're eating it right now, so we don't care how long it's going to last, right? That's not an issue here. Here, we're interested in reciting a bracha on something nice. Now, Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchok, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchok says, "V'yarei shamayim yotzi yidei shnehem." A person who fears Hashem, he tries to cover all grounds. He's yotzi yidei shnehem. He fits both of these opinions, and this is going back to the question of a bracha, that you have either a complete bagel, complete loaf, or you have a slice. And we had an argument of which one should you recite the bracha on. Rav Huna and Rabbi Yochanan. Rav Huna had said that you recite it on the slice if the slice is bigger, or you could recite it on either one if it's equal size. And Rabbi Yochanan said that you recite the bracha on the shalem, on the complete one. So Rav Nachman bar Yitzchok tells us, try to do both. Compromise. Figure out how to do both. How do you do both? So first, the Gemara tells us who is a Yarei Shamayim. It says Umanu, and who would be a Yarei Shamayim that does both? Mar Berei de Ravina, the son of Ravina. They called him Master, the son of Ravina, and it's brought in other areas, other places in the Gemara, how he was righteous, and he would fast often. We have a Gemara earlier where he broke a expensive cup in order to make sure that people didn't get too frivolous at a wedding ceremony. So we see this Ravina, the son of Ravina, is considered a Yarei Shamayim, someone who fears heaven. Now, he would do both. Now, how do you do both? The Mar Berei de Ravina, what did Mar Berei de Ravina used to do? The son of Ravina. So it says, Meiniach prusa b'soich hashlema. He would put the broken piece into the complete piece, which means under it, and he would hold them together, and he would recite the bracha on both and cut from both, or maybe just from the complete one, and this way he fulfilled both views. Now, what it sounds like is the shlema is the complete one, but you put the broken one with it, so it doesn't look like you're only cutting the complete one, but you definitely have to cut the shlema, the one on top, and maybe if you do cut, you could cut both, but if you're only going to cut one, you definitely have to cut the one on top, the shlema. So this is how you fulfill both views, because you're putting them together, reciting the bracha on both. Yes, Robert, I saw your hand was up.
No, yeah, what I was just concerned, because what I see is a contradiction, because it says inside the hole, but you're saying it's underneath the hole. So if somebody's a literalist, then you can't do the bracha, because then you break up the whole loaf. But you're saying that the interpretation is a piece inside the whole loaf and then break them together. I was just, before you made that statement, it was a little confusing to be able to do that.
Well, the whole is going to be sliced up.
Eventually, but not at the beginning. Right, but at the beginning, yeah. So but you said the interpretation is not inside, means it's a part of in some capacity. Okay.
That's okay. Yeah. In other words, it sounded like you have to cut the thing in half to put it in it.
Yeah, but then you can't do it. It's a contradiction in terms. Yeah. Okay. Good.
Like
Thank you.
Adding a leaf to a table, right?
You
gotta like break it apart.
Right.
No. Here we're just talking about you stick it under. You stick it under. Yes, Ben.
I have a problem with bringing us an example of truma compared to a blessing.
Okay.
Especially if in truma you can give half an onion, can you do half a bracha? You cannot. So how can you compare the two?
Why are you comparing giving a half an onion to half a bracha? That's like,
well, if you can give truma half an onion,
you could recite a bracha.
Half a bracha.
No, how about a bracha on half an onion also? You could give truma half an onion, you do a bracha on half an onion. Why don't you compare that?
I have a problem with giving half an onion to begin with. Either you give the whole big onion or the whole small one, or don't give anything. Half an onion is valueless, It only lasts so long, and that's it. It lasts a few days. You have to use it immediately, And it's not nice, what are you, you're a farmer and you're short of half an onion or
what? Ben, when you become a fundraiser, you'll understand. You have to be thankful for whatever you get. Yeah, you have to learn a little fundraising.
I understand that, but I can't compare it. I can't compare half an onion to a small full onion. I'd rather have the small full onion.
Because it's complete.
It's complete.
Well, it
it's
depends.
more value to me than half a big onion.
Yeah, if you have a large family, you're going to want the big half an onion rather than a small whole one, because you want to feed.
I would be happy with a smaller portion, but something that's complete.
Why? You need a larger amount. If you have more people, you need a larger amount.
No, you don't. You need smaller portions for each. That's all. No, really, I really have a problem with half an onion. I mean,
well, you have to understand that nowadays, we live in a very somewhat wealthy society where, people don't struggle so much with, having an onion. But in the olden days, first of all, they ate less than we do, and they could be that was their, they relied on these small things that was like very valuable to them. And
okay, I
so
can
each
accept,
thing is very, keep that in mind.
Accept that for those times, I wouldn't accept it today, but I cannot accept to compare something that doesn't have to be complete to a bracha that has to be complete.
Right. Mm-hmm.
That I really have a problem with. So why bring an example like that? I'm sure there's other examples. Doesn't have to be truma.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure your question, because it's not compared to a bracha that's not complete. It's compared to a bracha on an item that's not complete. That's why I'm having a problem on understanding what your question is. In other words, what's the difference between giving a gift?
I see. You mean a part of a bread and part of an onion.
Yeah.
But still, truma, I don't know. I thought it would have been a nicer example from somewhere else. I'm sure there is other psukim or whatever.
I mean, maybe a half a coconut maybe is better than a half an onion. Maybe would have sounded better. I don't know.
How about half a fig? Would you like half a fig?
Right. Anyway, in any event, that's the example that's given. I guess I guess the onions maybe were more popular for truma. They gave that example. Or maybe no one would
watermelon.
Right.
How about half a watermelon? And you got to feed a big family.
Right. So maybe that's it. Maybe that's why, a half an onion is actually enough for a large family. Half a fig is a real embarrassment. That half an onion, actually, you're putting the onion into another dish, and that half an onion is all you need really for a meal. So actually that might make sense why it is a half an onion, now that I think about it, because that's what a person would need for a whole meal is the half an onion, even if you have a large family, or you're slicing it up.
A whole onion, I eat a half, yeah.
Exactly. So that's it. That might be why it gives an example. In other words, you would never think of giving a half a fig. But do keep in mind that when it comes to tithing, on the one hand, you are allowed to give like truma. The Torah doesn't clearly set out how much to give, but this idea that you're saying, how could you give this small thing and not a larger amount? There is a concept of val tarbe la'aser umades. Don't give more. Just estimate. I'll just give you just take I have to give you about 20, 23. I'll just give you 25. There is a concept of being exact, not just estimating and giving rough numbers. So there is such a concept of being clear in what you have to give. I'm not saying you can't give a gift extra, but in certain things you can give more. But like paya, it says there's no limit. Right, that you could give, but
from 50
when it comes
onions,
to Meiser is supposed
50
to be
onions. Somebody should be able to give one onion, whether it's small or big or whatever. Yeah.
Right. Anyway, we hope that every yid should have abundance. We shouldn't have to worry to give them a whole case, even if we don't need.
But, if you had 49, you wouldn't have to give anything, right?
All right, Robert. Yes.
Yeah, you raise an important point that I've lost relevancy, is that within Judaism, I guess there is, and I'm sure I may have heard it, but there is a law of tithing, what is an appropriate, given your station in life or your wealth, that you should give back. And so, I mean, I guess that's a whole nother lesson somewhere, right? It's
a very, for sure. There's laws about it. In fact, someone just asked me on Friday a question. He says, his mother-in-law passed away. He wanted to know, does he inherited some money. He asked me if you have to give meiser, tithing, from the inheritance. So we looked it up. Of course, salary, for sure you have to give a tithe. You have to give a 10%, but on inheritance, it also says you have to give a 10% to charity. And once I told him you have to, he says, well, I don't know if his wife is going to do it, but but that's the law. There's actually books about Meiser. There's a book right here from also printed by Art Scroll. The laws of tzedakah and Meiser. This is a good book about the comprehensive guide. It brings a lot of sources as well of different scenarios when a person has to give tithing. There's a lot of questions about Meiser. What can you use your tithing if you want to buy Jewish books and then you could lend them out? Would that be good enough? Could you do that? That's it's an interesting question. Can you buy something with, let's say you buy a set of Encyclopedia Judaica or something, or some type of a set of Talmud would be a better example, because that's like Torah study. And well, I don't know, maybe you're doing a favor for the community, because you're buying books, let's say, and then you're lending it out to the community. So would that be considered acceptable usage of Meiser funds? Can you give Meiser for your tuition, for your children's schooling? Would that be eligible? Can you use your tithing? You have your 10%. Can you use it for that? Can you pay membership to your shul with your Meiser? Generally, the rule is certain things that are obligations, like can you buy a lulav and esrog with Meiser? No, you can't buy you can't do your obligations with your tithing money. But something that's not an obligation is where there might be room. There might be room. Anyway, these are questions that are discussed in all of these books. Yes, Ezra.
So the question you asked about, can you buy books and lend them out? I would say that because you're still in control of the books, it would be a problem. However, if you were to donate them to the shul, where the shul is open to everyone pretty much at any time, that would not be a problem.
This is your thought, or you've seen this?
No, this is my thought.
Your thought, okay. Anyway, I'm not. There's a lot written about these things. It's not. I'm not gonna. Can't tell you an answer.
Which Meiser are we talking about? Meiser Ani, Meiser.
Well, no. This specific discussion that Robert brought up, he's really talking about nowadays the Meiser that people give from their earnings. But the Gemara that we're learning is talking about Truma. Really, I compared it to Meiser, where there's a specific amount that one gives. We were talking about giving more and extra. So I was mentioning that when it comes to the Truma, actually, there is different amounts people give, because the Torah itself doesn't say how much Truma a person has to give. There's a term in the Gemara, chita achas piteres es akriv, and one kernel, one stalk exempts a whole huge pile of grain. But rabbinically, it's either 1/40th, 1/50th, or 1/60th. When it comes to Meiser, there is a concept of being exact, measuring exactly how much you have to give. And we were discussing it because Ben didn't like the idea of someone giving a half an onion for Truma. It's a little stingy and looks pretty cheap. But
so you can give the associate membership from Meiser, not the one you're obligated to, the first shul. The second shul you can give from Meiser.
It sounds good. It sounds like a good idea. Again, you have to look up each of these things individually, but it sounds like that might be an option. If you want to just be friendly with the other shuls and you're doing it as a more, but you don't really daven there, so you really sounds like a possibility. Obviously, the best place to give Meiser is to someone poor, and pidyon shvuyim. Redeeming captives, or or helping someone financially, helping someone else. But there is room to use Meiser for other things that you might need it for. And then there's also the idea that people give more than Meiser. They give a chomesh, which is double Meiser, and that's the amount that a person. Of course, it's nicer to give more, so you give instead of 10%, 20%, and on the extra amount, maybe there's more room for using it for other
purposes,
other projects, and even though it's not going to the poor. But these are all discussions, and have been there's a lot of ink spilled on these topics. Yes.
Would it be possible to utilize someone's offer of being a co-signer, not necessarily when there's a financial liability, but just when they're backing up somebody else's credit as part of MISR or part of a contribution of some sort?
So the co-signer has something financially you're gonna what are you saying, that you're only if the guy doesn't pay, that you're sort of like putting your money up?
They would be on the that they're supporting the other one's credit by vouching for them. Can that be considered a form of charitable contribution?
I don't think so, unless you end up having to pay it, maybe.
No, there's not a legal obligation to do that.
It's a kind,
But that's
it's
what
an
a
act of
cosigner is. When you're a cosigner, you're basically saying if the other guy defaults, then you're responsible for whatever's there.
So the example would be, I made $10 million this year, and someone wants a loan of $1 million, and I'm going to be a cosigner. So I did my MISR because I signed on a loan. There's no exemption. You got to give $1 million. You made $10 million. You have to give $1 million to charity, and you can't say, "Oh, I signed on to someone else's loan. $1 million. I made myself potentially responsible." That's potentially responsible. That's a nice act.
But if it's not on a loan,
what is it on? Well,
just to say that the other party has integrity and
that sounds great. I would love to do that. I made $10 million, then I don't have to give any money. I'm just gonna vouch for someone.
They don't understand.
You think that's good enough?
It's not the same.
I wouldn't love to do that. Actually, I'd love to give the MISR. I'd love to give $1 million to charity.
He's talking about witness, like a witness.
I don't understand. Obviously, I'm not understanding your example.
That's not a MISR because you're not guaranteeing any default.
Right.
Of course not. Yeah.
No, that's right, Robert.
Even guaranteeing is not MISR. It doesn't make sense. Guaranteeing is not giving MISR. It's not giving charity to a poor person.
Right. It's moot.
I'm not sure if I think. Whatever, you can call me later if you have the other question. I don't understand it really. Okay, so we are on 39B. We've just mentioned this interesting way of a Yarei Shamayim, someone who fears heaven, how they should be able to follow both views, that they're reciting the bracha on these two things. Well, one is a larger slice, and the other is a complete item, like a complete loaf of bread, or a bagel, something complete, and they're putting them together in this way. You're reciting the bracha on both. Now, in Rashi says, and then you cut either both or just the complete one. So they're both in your hand, and you could cut either both or just the complete one. Now, the Gemara then says, Tani Tana Kamei de Rav Nachman bar Yitzchok. So one of the rabbis repeated brises, taught the teachings of the brises in front of Rav Nachman bar Yitzchok. Now, the Rav Nachman bar Yitzchok is an Amoira, so it doesn't mean a real Tana. It doesn't mean someone from the Mishnah taught. It means a Tana, meaning someone who repeated the Mishnayos was called a Tana, someone who repeated these teachings. So what that means is the great rabbis, they used to have someone who had a great memory, and the people with the great memories, they would repeat the teachings, and then the big rabbi would expound on them. So they had someone who had everything memorized, And the other rabbi, that was more like a encyclopedia guy. There's the encyclopedia, but they needed the big rabbi was the one who expounded and explained what they meant. But the person had a great memory. He would say these teachings of the Brises. So a Tana, such a person was taught in front of Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchok, Maniach haprusa b'seicha shlema u'boitzeya u'mavarech. That the way a person should do this is you put the broken piece, the slice, inside the complete one, or meaning under the complete one, u'boitzeya, and then you slice it, and ubarech and umavarech, and recite the bracha. Now, this is a little surprising. So, what's surprising is, why does he say you slice it and recite the bracha, sounding like you recite the bracha afterwards, after you sliced it? That sounds a little surprising. So in the Rif and in the Rush, it doesn't have that word umavarech. It's not discussing when to say the bracha. So let's read it without that. So you put the prusa, the slice, under the complete one, ubaitseya, and you slice it. Amar lei. So Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchok asked this scholar who would repeat this scholar who would repeat the brises. He obviously was not the usual scholar in front of Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchok, but he had arrived and he repeated this, and he was a Tana, meaning someone who usually did teach brises. So he mentioned this statement, he mentioned this law, and Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchok said, Ma shemecha, what is your name? Amar lei. So he said, my name is either Salmon or Shalmon, and the Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchok said, now I understand your name. Shalom ata ushleima mishnascha. You are shalom, you are peaceful, and your teaching is complete. Shesamta shalom bein hatalmidim, because you placed peace between the students, that you figured out a way to do both, to fulfill both opinions. And those are the opinions of Rav Huna and Rabbi Yochanan. So this is the Gemara about a slice and a whole one. It's a continuation, really, of the previous Gemara, where we spoke about the pas tsunuma, the broken pieces, and here the Gemara now says about we have Rav Huna really again, because the earlier Gemara, I'm sorry, not Rav Huna again. We have an argument between Rav Huna and Rav Yochanan about reciting the bracha on a complete one or on pieces. And the previous Gemara was about pas pneuma, which was these broken, these pieces of bread that were broken up. And now the Gemara continues, and it says about on Pesach. Amar Rav Papa says, "Hakol moedim b'Pesach." Everyone agrees on Pesach that even Rabbi Yochanan that says that you recite the bracha on the shalem, but he agrees. Everyone agrees on Pesach sheminiach prusa b'seich shlema u'baitzeya, that you put the prusa, which means the broken matzah, inside or under the complete one, ubaitseya, and you break a piece. Now, what this means is that normally you would just recite the bracha on the complete one, and here on Pesach you include the broken one with it. My timer, what is the reason? Lechem oini ksiv, it says lechem oini, which means that the matzah is supposed to be a way that a poor person eats it, which means that there's supposed to be a broken loaf, which symbolizes poverty, that a poor person doesn't have a complete loaf, and he then breaks the complete one, because of course you need the lechem mishnah. You do need a complete loaf as well, 2 complete loaves, but you include the broken one there when you recite the bracha. Now, of course, we'll talk more about this tomorrow, but that is the on Pesach, when you recite the bracha on the matzah. How do we do it? So we recite the initial bracha on all 3 matzahs. Then you drop the bottom matzah. Now, what are the 3 matzahs? The 3 matzahs are really 2 complete ones and 1 broken one in the middle. Then you drop the bottom one, you recite the second bracha. Now, we'll talk a little more about it tomorrow. Amar Rab Abba, and Rab Abba says, "B'Shabbos chayav adam l'tzoya al shtei kikros." You need to make the bracha hamoitzi on Shabbos on both loaves complete. My timer, what is the reason? Because lechem mishnah ksiv, it says when it talks about the mana, the man, it says lechem mishnah, the double lechem, that on Friday they would have a double bread. And so the rabbis learn out from there that we're supposed to recite the bracha and have the meal on Shabbos with a double loaf. Each of the three meals, we're supposed to have 2 loaves of bread, and that is so on Shabbos you don't have you don't do this pieces, or we don't get involved in this issue. We recite the hamaitzi on 2 full loaves. Okay, we're going to stop here. Actually, we can do one more line here. Amar Rav Ashi Chazina l'Rav Kahana d'Nakatarti. Rav Ashi says, I saw Rav Kahana that he on Shabbos he took 2, and what's a chada, but he only cut 1, because you don't need to cut both for lechem mishnah. You could cut just 1, and that's good enough. In other words, it says liktu lechem mishnah. You should gather lechem mishnah. It doesn't say they would eat the lechem mishnah both at the same time. They cut both. It says they gathered it. So it means you should have both there at the table, not necessarily you have to cut it. There is actually a tradition, I believe, from the Shalah that they would cut both challahs. I think I've seen it once or twice over the years, where someone will actually take both challahs, put one on top of the other, and slice all the way down, all the way through. There is such a custom.